Hi folks, I just have a couple quick announcements here, and then I'll hand it off to Christy, who will be your instructor today and Thursday, and then I believe also next week, Tuesday and Thursday as well, and then Jeff will be Monday and Wednesday. So some super quick announcements. I know I wasn't here yesterday. Like I said, I'll try to be here at least like 1 to 2 days a week until the first break, but if you have any questions in the meantime on anything, shoot me an email on Slack. You can always reach me, give me a call, shoot me a text. Just a quick logistical, a few logistical things here. First and foremost, if you haven't submitted the Best Buy homework, please do so. So you'll notice right now, if you haven't submitted it, you'll have a 0. I'm going to go through and reopen that for folks that haven't submitted it. Please do, because you'll get feedback on it, and that'll be really helpful to sort of gauge how you're doing with your code and in class and whatnot. And just an update on the late policy. I pinged this in Slack yesterday as well, but I just want to reiterate here. So ultimately, it's hard to fall behind if you don't keep on top of the assignments and on top of the work. So in short, if you miss one assignment, then we'll set up a meeting with the student success rep just to make sure that you're doing okay. And then if you miss 2 assignments, you risk being removed from the program. I know that sounds harsh, but again, it's hard to fall behind, and you have instructors and teaching assistants and folks here to help you. So if you're lost, if you need help, if you're stuck, ask questions. That's what we're here for. So don't let it come to that. We're committed to getting all of you through this program. So ask for help if you're stuck. And ultimately, these homework and these assignments and whatnot are going to help you reinforce your learning, because we don't want you to fall behind. Because if you get lost now, it'd be really hard to catch up later. So just want to say that real quick. Also, just another heads up, just as far as the grading rubric moving forward. Oh, by the way, all what I'm saying right now is all in the Google Classroom for announcements, Chrissy's agenda for today, and work and whatnot. So everything I'm saying, don't have to remember it. I'm literally just reading off the Google Classroom right now for that day. Going forward, assignments will be done on a scale of 1 to 5 basis. 5 being you're doing awesome, rockstar, perfect. 1 being you gotta get help. So I posted a link there in Google Classroom. Feel free to check it out. If you have any thoughts or questions on that, certainly let me know. Another quick just logistical thing. When you do submit an assignment, whether it be the feedback surveys or the homework or whatever, when you submit it, make sure that you also click. There's a big blue like mark as done button. I think Dana, you were actually asking about that. So when you submit it, make sure you click. There's like a blue mark as done. So even though you might like complete something or submit something, you also have to click that blue button. So if you have any questions on where to find that, just ping me or flag me down here. That's just a heads up. If you know you submitted something, but you're not seeing it submitted, basically, it's because you have to also click that button. I know it's like a kind of a silly two-step process, but unfortunately, I just have what to do to submit assignments here. Next one here, I'm almost done, I promise, and then I'll hand that to Christy. Next one here, we do have an anonymous feedback survey of anything in the class at all. So you submit that nameless, no name, no email, unless you want to be contacted about it. And you can also identify on there who you wish to see that feedback. So you can select only Jason, our student success rep, or you can select Jason, myself, and the creating and code staff. So anything at all, like feedback on the class, feedback you're not comfortable in sharing with anyone besides Jason. So certainly use that if you like. Again, there's no way to identify yourself unless you request that to be contacted about it. So anything at all, feel free to use that form there. We hope that will be helpful. Next one here, so our capstone touch point is approaching on Monday here. So keep an eye out just for what that criteria looks like. I'll post it tonight in the classroom just for what's expected. It'll just be sort of gauging the ideas you have, any thoughts or questions and so forth. And some folks have already reached out, so if you have, I'll get back to you here, but if you have ideas, thoughts, questions, concerns, if you're totally lost in the capstone, definitely flag me down or email me or hit me up on Slack. And then in terms of sort of like managing that work for your capstone, Christy here will be going over a really quick rundown on Agile, but there will also be some Agile homework for you to do tonight as well to sort of be prepared on how to manage your work for this capstone project. And you'll be managing in ways that real software development companies do. So there'll be some homework on that as well, so keep an eye out for that. And the last thing here, Hack Upstate is April 6th and 7th, and I think I might have said this earlier, but I'm going to reiterate it again. Mark your calendars, and you should definitely come out to Hack Upstate. So if you don't know, that's our bread and butter here. 24-hour hackathon, come up with a crazy idea, and you make it. So even though you're sort of all just diving in here, share those ideas. Get feedback on your capstones. Join a team. Get mentored. Meet new people. Make new friends. Come out. It'll be an awesome time. You'll have a lot of fun. We have a lot of code newbies coming to those hackathons as well. So you will not be alone. Come out, get feedback on your resumes from sponsors, talk about internship opportunities with sponsors. Definitely come to it if you can. So I expect to see hopefully all of you there. That'd be awesome. Show of hands, who's planning to come to Hack Upstate? Is anyone?
Halfway.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah. I know. So do your best, even if you want to come out for like an hour or two, like for like the opening ceremony, to come and network with folks. Go up to our sponsors, talk to them, because they're there to give you internships and employment opportunities. So highly encourage you all to come. It'll be a lot of fun. And you'll get to hopefully make an awesome project with you. So with all that, I know there's a lot. So any questions here? You can also go directly like in the Google Classroom and comment on it if you read it over later and have a question. But any questions or comments or thoughts, concerns, anything I just said here? Anything at all? Going once? Cool. All right, with all that, appreciate you bearing with me just on logistical stuff. I know this stuff was boring. And so now we're going to get into the class stuff. So without further ado, let's introduce Christy. So Christy will tell you more about herself. And we're thrilled to have her for this week, Tuesday and Thursday. And then next week, Tuesday and Thursday. So Christy, I'll hand it over to you, and you can get kicked off here.
Cool.
Thanks,
all right, and so that I don't forget to do this, because I totally will, we're going to do attendance, because I'm like weirdly detail oriented and then also really bad at remembering logistics like this, so it's like
this will also help Christy remember all your names, so that's why we have your images there. So that's this is the first time Christy's here, so it'll take everyone some time.
Yeah, you guys will probably experience this over and over as like the different instructors switching it out. Like at some point you guys are going to be the pros and we're going to be like so give me just a second. Oop.
I think everyone's actually here. Let me just see. Cool, yeah, so you can just scroll all the way to the bottom and then submit it actually.
Do I have to?
Yeah, just hit submit. This is for folks that aren't here.
Oh, gotcha.
So yeah, thanks Christy, appreciate it. Yeah, do none.
Oh. Required fields and validation. What? Cool.
Awesome. Thanks, Christy.
All right. I'll just totally forget otherwise, so. All right. Pause this so that it doesn't start automatically randomly playing. All right. So, this is basically just a super short intro. I watched Jeff's and I was like, man, okay, he tells stories much more long form than I do. I met some of you guys at the kickoff. I didn't get to meet all of you, but I'll be sort of in and out and around. As you guys probably know, you've all met Cash at this point. Cash is kind of my backup because basically I'm supposed to be having a baby at some point in the next like 4 or 5 weeks. So when I was talking to Jesse, I was like, yeah, I think we need to be a little careful about how we plan this because I'm not going to be able to control whether or not I show up to class if I'm in labor. Sorry. But anyways, so that's sort of random, obvious elephant in the room information. But as I mentioned at the kickoff, so I actually did a career pivot about, I guess, 6 years ago now. So a lot of this is about how I actually didn't start out, I don't have a degree in computer science. I actually have an art degree, so and interestingly enough, I don't even have a graphic design degree. I have a degree in painting. But I learned a lot of typography actually doing bookmaking in college. I did tons of printmaking, bookmaking, painting. Lots of super old school non-tech stuff. But it's actually been really interesting to me as I've transitioned into a career in tech, how a lot of the things that I learned in college that you would think don't relate at all are actually super helpful for just life working in businesses and working in tech and understanding how to break down projects, all that kind of stuff. Anyways, we'll move on to the next slide. So yeah, like I said, I love to make things, so I decided to study art in college. kind of didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. Not that unusual. Still sometimes kind of wonder when I'm gonna like, fully know what I'm doing forever, but that's a side note. However, I learned some really cool things in art school. So have any of you guys ever heard of the concept of design thinking? Design thinking? So design thinking, and it's a form of creative problem solving, but it's frankly something that actually has a lot in common with the agile methodologies we're going to talk about after this, because it's this idea of looking at a problem and then saying like, okay, what are all the different ways I can solve this problem? And then trying to iterate through those like different solutions as fast as possible to see which one actually makes the most sense. And frankly, it's one of those things that like, I feel like everyone should learn at some point, just because it's so useful. Like, it's not just applicable to like design, it's frankly applicable to any solution, any problem that needs a solution. So creative problem solving, also very much related to design thinking. Project planning, actually, weirdly enough, I learned a ton of in college, because a lot of art projects, at least the kind that I like, tend to involve a lot of like many steps that match, like that have to like build on top of each other. Very similar actually to how software works. And then lastly, visual communication, which frankly is probably the most direct tie into the kind of stuff that I do today. But it's thinking about how you can put something on a page or on a screen and convey information to other people. However, being an artist, I was missing a few important things. So, not that you can't do any of these things with art, I just never figured out how to do them in a way that actually felt like it made sense to me. So, applying design thinking to real-world problems. One of my favorite things about my job now, and frankly, every job I've had since shifting into tech, is that people are coming to you with real problems that they legitimately don't know how to solve, and you get to actually be part of solving those problems, which is just a lot of fun, frankly. I'm a weird computer person because I like people as well, so creative problem, all right, maybe I can talk today. Creative problem solving for real people, that's for me a big motivation. Getting to actually see the things that I'm doing affect real people. The ability to constantly learn, it's something that, frankly, you have to figure out how to enjoy in this field, because if you don't keep learning, you'll turn around and be like, oh, everything just changed. Okay, now I have to start over again. So it's not, you don't have to like constantly learn everything all the time, but enjoying reading, learning about things, find the things that you're passionate about. We're gonna, like, this class, not just today, but like the whole course, I mean, you guys are gonna get exposed to a ton of different types of technology, a bunch of different types of technologists. Like, we all do really different things. Like, keep an eye out for the things that you're interested in that like make you kind of like, oh wait, I could do that, like, all day, every day, because everyone, like, there's so many different parts of tech that the part that you're excited about may not be the part that everyone else is excited about, and that may be the part that's like leads you into the job that's really the best fit for you, right? Obviously, there's a little bit of like market overlap there, but using visual communication to make people's lives better. Like I said, the whole problem solving for real people, kind of beating a dead horse here, sorry. And then the other thing that I found really frustrating as an artist is that I think art has a lot of value, and frankly, art and design have a ton of value. Most people aren't aware of it, though. I got tired of having to explain to people why the things I was doing were actually like useful and important. It is one of the advantages of tech, is that people are coming to you with problems they legitimately don't know how to solve, and then you actually solve them. So there's like a really obvious like value proposition there, which is just nice because it means I don't have to spend half my day explaining to people why what I'm doing is important. I get to just actually do work, which is nice. All right, so this is my graphical representation. How clear it is, that's a whole separate question, but basically back in 2013, I got really interested. I was like, okay, so I have an art and design background. I'll try web design, right? So I started looking into web design. Was like, okay, this stuff's really cool, but I need to know what I can actually build so that I can design it. So it was like, well, how do I figure that out if I don't like actually know how to build it? So then I started looking into how to build. So I started learning HTML, CSS, JavaScript, basically right where you guys are now, in the slightly pre-bootcamp era, and ended up spending about 6 months on my own in my in-laws' basement learning to code. As a people person, that was an incredibly depressing 6 months, but also like really amazing because I basically went from like 0 to like walking in terms of like being functional with code. And I figured out that like I love this stuff, that it's just like the frustration of figuring out like, okay, I don't know how to get to like through a project and like I'm trying to figure out how to solve this, but then once you actually get to the other side, making those little leaps like is so motivating and so much fun for me anyways. I hope that you guys will agree long term. So the other thing, frankly, and like I've had this conversation with a lot of people who are like new as developers, get yourself up and running enough to get a job. Like I know that sounds like a low bar on some level. It's like really like we want you guys to get out into the professional world doing this stuff. Like, and I say that because essentially what I learned on my own was probably like a quarter of what I actually learned in my first like year to 18 months of being a developer. As soon as I got a job and I was around people who were doing this all day, every day, like my learning went from here like to here, right? Because I was with people who like had way more experience than me all the time. Like when I got stuck, I could ask questions. They all had resources to push at me that I was like, wait, but what do you do with like, wait, but how do I deal with this like really stupid thing that Internet Explorer is doing? They're like, well, you know, blah, 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 blah. Here's the standard way that you fix that. And I'm like, oh, I didn't even know you could do half that stuff. Okay. Like, even getting, frankly, into code bases that you didn't write. So a lot of the stuff that we're doing right now, like you guys are writing your own code, like that happens. I'm not saying you're not going to keep writing code, but when you're working on a team, it changes. I know that Jeff was telling you guys about like your like each other are your best resources. Working collaboratively is really good for learning like code. It really is, because everyone's brain works a little bit differently, and so the way that you might solve a problem is very different than the person sitting next to you might solve a problem, right? And so figuring out how to work together, looking at the different ways that people approach stuff, like, yeah, it just accelerates your learning a ton. So my first job, I actually started out as a front-end developer, doing like kind of in a unique role where I was doing both design and development. And I did that for about 18 months, I think. It's close to 2 years, it's in there. And then actually we moved to Syracuse. So I worked remotely for them for a while, but they weren't really set up for me to work remotely. So eventually I switched. Since moving to Syracuse, I've had 2 different jobs. Have you guys heard of WCNY, the local PBS station? Yeah, so I was the entire website at WCNY for almost a year, which had a lot of fun pieces to it, had a lot of burnout pieces to it. So I ended up basically deciding that if I wanted to do this long term, I needed to not work there anymore, because it was, I was solo, so like I didn't really get a vacation for a year. Because whenever I took a day off, eventually something would break and somebody would call me and I would have to remote in and like fix stuff, which is exhausting. So they're a great organization. I'm not knocking WCNY, they're a nonprofit, so it happens. But I learned a ton there. They're completely WordPress based, so I had kind of picked up WordPress just because lots of people wanted me to do projects with it, and so when I was doing some basic freelancing when I was first learning, I was like, okay, sure, I can learn PHP, and kind of figured it out. And then being all day, every day WordPress at WCNY taught me a ton more about it. I still don't love WordPress as much as Jeff does, so if you have in-depth WordPress questions, ask Jeff. But the cool thing about WordPress, it's super common. There's tons of resources about it, and it'll teach you to learn how to think in a content management system. Because that's the biggest thing is it's very different to go from like, okay, I've just made a static page to now I have a static page, but it's like a bunch of the content isn't static and it's actually coming in from all these different places. It's just a brain leap thing. All right, so then the second half of this screen over here is actually more of what I'm working on now. So I actually currently work at Raymore and Flanagan, which people are always like, so you sell furniture, right? I'm like, not really. So they're actually headquartered here, and we, besides all of the internal technology that there's like a huge team that supports, we also have a large e-commerce website. So I have a large e-commerce website. So my first job was actually this company is an e-commerce company. So my first job was actually working in e-commerce, and I was kind of excited to go back to that actually working at Raymore, because it's just it's very interesting to understand how people shop, understand like the different ways that people are getting what they need out of the website that you have. There's a lot of like direct data of like, okay, we changed something, it had a positive or negative effect on revenue, right? Like there's some like really nice clear pathway things. And yeah, so that's essentially what I'm doing now. I'm actually technically considered a user experience designer at Raymore. So user experience design is one of those like weird fields where I tell people what I do and they're like, huh? What does that mean exactly? Basically, I understand, like I try to understand how different customers approach different problems. Just like I was saying, people approach problem solving really differently. People approach shopping, people approach walking down the street, frankly, completely differently. So it's taking that and then translating it into design, which is kind of interesting because I actually am embedded in the business unit. I'm not actually in the IT department, but I end up being like this weird bridge because I speak IT, and I also speak business, so I end up sort of like translating for everyone all the time. And like I said, understanding actually what is possible. Plus, when all the other developers are too busy to write code we need for tracking stuff and analytics, I'm like, I'll just do it, it's fine. So I basically keep coding wherever they'll let me at work. But it just depends on the project I'm working on, essentially. And yeah. So apparently I forgot about this slide, sorry. But we just talked about all of that. And in general, I see myself as a creative problem solver, somebody who loves learning. I love inventing and improving systems. It's like a weird thing, but it's so much fun. And sharing knowledge with people, which is part of why I'm here. And frankly, I like going on adventures. So this is actually in 2013 when I did my career pivot. We took 6 months off before that, and hike the Appalachian Trail. So that was how I ended up in my in-laws' basement. They kindly took us in while we were being nomadic for 6 months. But yeah, like I said, I'll be a little in and out at some point in the next month, but you guys are welcome to email me, ping me on Slack. My Twitter handle's up here. I'm lazy on social media most of the time, so I'm not super active on Twitter. If you Slack me and I am figuring out how to be a new parent, it may take me a couple of days to get back to you, but I will get back to you eventually. Yeah. All right. So I don't have specific slides for Agile, but I did warn Jesse when he asked me to talk about Agile like yesterday that I was like, I am not an Agile expert. The reason I say that is like, I've learned about Agile several times. Every place I've worked that actually says they're trying to implement Agile has not managed to like successfully implement Agile. Which actually, I took a look at some of the stuff that you guys are gonna like be watching and like reading tonight, and it's pretty true. It's like a lot of people know what Agile is, but it's really more of a methodology than it is like this specific business practices kind of a thing. And so, but it's easier, right, to adopt the stuff you can see of like, oh, well, if we have a stand-up meeting for 15 minutes every morning, we're Agile. And it's like, well, it depends. You know, you can spend 15 minutes talking about your dogs and cats every morning, and it really doesn't do anything for your development process. So Agile really is like, it's a philosophy of breaking things down into small, manageable bites, and then scheduling out those bites into like committing to when you're going to actually complete those small pieces. So think about it this way. Have you guys ever tried to do like any huge project, right? Where you have like, okay, I know this is gonna take me like 6 months to get done, right? And if you don't break that project down into like, all right, every day I'm gonna get, like if you don't break it down into small concrete pieces where like every day I'm gonna do this little piece, or like every 2 weeks I'm gonna like complete this whatever piece, right? You've got 6 months go by and you're like, well, I wrote down that I'm going to do this thing and nothing actually happened, right? Like it's difficult, like as human beings, it's hard for us to like say, oh yeah, I'm gonna get this thing done over the next 6 months. And then it's like, well, I'm hungry and tired, and I'd really rather go hang out with my friends, or like, you know, watch the next great TV show on Netflix, or like whatever. It's just, it's easy to say, hey, I'll do it later. And with Agile, it's, you break stuff down, but you also make commitments. So you estimate how much time you think something is going to take, and then you use those estimates to make commitments and say like, hey, okay, I think that I can get this little piece of this done like 2 days from now. So that means that now you've made that commitment both to yourself and hopefully to somebody else as well. So 2 days you got to check and you're like, oh shoot, wait, I got to actually get this done. Like you have deadlines, right? So you set deadlines, they're reoccurring. That's what a sprint is essentially. It's a cycle of like committing to getting a certain amount of stuff done by the end of the sprint, essentially. So like sprints can be anywhere from like a week, 2 weeks, like some places do them as like a month, kind of pushing it. But it's like, it is really about breaking stuff down into their smallest pieces and then scheduling out and making commitments to actually completing those pieces. And it's also prioritizing what I would call like a minimum viable product for each of those pieces. So it's easy, and you'll meet lots of people like this in tech. I can be one of them as well sometimes. It's really easy to become a perfectionist about the stuff that you're working on, because it's like, well, but if I just rewrite this again, it'll be so much better. And it's really easy to not actually ask the question, okay, how much time is it going to take me to rewrite this? How much value am I going to get out of rewriting it? Or how much value is like the person I'm doing this for going to get out of me rewriting it? Does that fit? Like, do I actually have the time, right? Like, is the amount of time it's going to take actually worth the effort? Like, you have to ask that question. It's easy to be like, but it'll be so much better. And so a big part of why a lot of places that actually do implement Agile find it really effective is because they ask that question on a regular basis, right? Like, okay, I've said that I can do this in 6 hours. I just spent the first 4 doing it. I have 2 hours left. What's the best use of my next 2 hours, right? Like, that's going to actually allow me to complete this thing that I said I was going to get done in 6 hours. So it's especially like the way that we're going to be kind of having you guys use it internally. It's about taking a bigger project, break it down into your smaller pieces, like decide, okay, how long do I think these will take me? Personal suggestion, I still do this, and I always tell people when you're brand new, take your estimate of how long you think it's going to take you and then double it, because generally you still end up taking longer than you think you will. Perfectionist, like I said. So it's, yeah, anyways, it's about setting those benchmarks, because once you have those benchmarks, you can communicate those with the instructors, you can communicate them with Jesse, we can help hold you accountable to making the kind of progress you want to make, so that when it comes around for your capstone project actually like be done, it will actually be done. Or you will have at least made really significant progress on it. Because frankly, this is a do as I say, not as I do, because I was up late last night writing most of this stuff. So you, like, when you actually schedule stuff out and hold yourself accountable to it, you don't have to do the late night scramble and then not have a chance to actually properly take a look at stuff, step back, see what's going on. Stuff just comes out way better when you actually work on it in pieces. All right. I think Jesse told me to talk about Agile for like 2 minutes. That was like 15, sorry. All right. I have a logistical question for you guys. What time have you been normally taking break in, like? 7-ish. Okay, cool. We can probably manage that. All right, we're not at Git yet. There we go. All right. Ooh, don't play. Okay. So, as I think Jeff mentioned, he asked me to go over both command line and Git and GitHub with you guys tonight. If you start getting like glazed over where like words are not meaning anything anymore, please either ask me a question or just tell me to be quiet for a minute so that you can like take a deep breath. How many of you guys have actually heard of like the command line or the terminal? Okay. Have you ever used it?
Yes, we all use it.
Oh, I guess, yeah, you guys, did you use it for SAS? Okay, cool. How did you feel about it? When I first got introduced to the command line, I was like, I don't think it's the 80s anymore. Like, I think we have other things that are way prettier that we can do this with. Here's the thing. The command line's actually, it's one of those things that has a pretty steep learning curve, but once you get used to it, it's actually super powerful. that being said, developers feel totally differently about the command line. Some people are like, okay, I know enough to like run SAS and other file watchers and to like build compilers, and I'm good. Like, and other developers are like, what are you talking about? I've automated half the stuff I do at work, like with different commands in the command line. Like, what are you doing with your life that you don't have like a huge custom, like, I mean, you can get intense into command line. We're not going to get that intense tonight. On the spectrum of like, I know enough to run stuff and like I automate my entire life, I'm probably somewhere like over here. So like, I'm functional in the command line. I enjoy using it for certain things, but do I spend my entire life in the command line? That is not, it's not me. So it has a lot of different names. So we have terminal, command line, obviously, which I was just using, command prompt, shell, console, and then CLI, which actually stands for command line interface. They all do a lot of similar things. So shell particularly tends to be more Windows-based. The other thing I should note about this, I'm teaching you guys the Unix command line, so that's Linux and Mac. Believe it or not, I don't think we're sponsored by Apple. The reason you guys are all on Macs is actually not just because we're like, Apple is amazing. Although you will run into people that feel that way. It's actually because Unix is like basically like a family of operating systems. Linux is one, Mac OS is another one. They're very similar to each other. The majority of web servers in the world are either Microsoft based or Linux based. I think the last time I checked, it's been a little bit. I think it's like 60-40 or 70-30 Linux to Microsoft. Microsoft has been making some serious gains recently, so it's probably more like 60-40. But that means that knowing the command line and being familiar with your file structure actually on your computer has the same type of file structure as a server does, like a standard Linux server does. So it's kind of fun because you can mess around on your own computer and it's way easier to mess with remote servers that you can't actually see. Anyways, that was a side note, sorry. All right, so the command line at its like most basic definition, it's text you write into your computer to make it do stuff. The most common one is called bash. And bash is just a command line program. Like, there's a bunch of different other ones, but most people are running some form of bash. You can actually, since Windows 10 essentially realized that a lot of people really like the bash shell, you can actually pull up a bash shell on a Windows 10 compute, like Windows 10 Plus as well, which is pretty cool. Windows has its own shell as well. If you get used to using a bash shell and you try to use a Windows shell, you will feel a great sense of vertigo. But they do similar things, they just do it in different ways. All right, so these are the ways that I tend to use this kind of thing. They're pretty common. So it's using version control, which we are going to do today. Running build tools, so SAS is one of the ones that you guys did. If you guys do any kind of what's called static site generation, so you can essentially run a compiler that will put a bunch of different files together, create them into a static site on your computer for you. You can actually run a server on your computer. I can guarantee you will be doing this at some point during this course, not today. Running servers on your computer is actually a fantastic way to work. Because if your internet connection goes out, you can actually still do stuff. You can also automate files, like I said. You can automate file actions with scripts. You can figure out how to automate all kinds of really cool things. And then, you know, there's the hacker side of it, which is you can actually use the command prompt to control all kinds of other computers, most namely servers, which is what you're going to actually most of the time be controlling, which should not require hacking and should just require the proper authentication keys. Not going to encourage you guys to start breaking the law. All right, so basic structure of a prompt. So there's the prompt, which this graphic's kind of tiny, I apologize. But so the stuff in the red box over here, this has a tilde, a $sign, and then has a little cursor square. The tilde is telling you where you are. The $sign is saying, like, this is like the division between where you are on the computer and the stuff you're actually writing, so you don't get you don't merge them together. The cursor, that's just a cursor. At this point, I'm gonna go with you all know what a cursor does. It's an old school cursor in the sense that if you it doesn't do the line that'll tell you exactly where it is. You'll get a feel for where your stuff's where your text will drop it. It just takes a little practice. All right, so commands, which I believe you guys ran the sass watch command yesterday, right? So sass in that case would be the program. Watch is an option. Options generally start with a dash. And then arguments don't start with a dash, generally speaking. So it can be, depending on the program, takes all kinds of different arguments and have all kinds of different options, essentially. But that's just the basic structure. You're going to see that structure over and over again. Sometimes things will take multiple arguments, so they get kind of long, but it's, that's the structure. And like I said, the whole directory structure. All right. Directories and folders are the same thing. Most developers are going to talk in directories. Most business users are going to talk in folders. Get used to hearing both and understanding that they are exactly the same thing. But your directory is essentially organized like an upside down tree. So this is true on, like I said, true on web servers, also true on your computer. / is always going to be the root directory. So that's as far up as you can go. And then everything trees out from there, essentially. So we're gonna hop over here. So this, we're actually gonna use the VS Code one. Oh boy, I need to make this not this tiny. Sorry guys. All right. This was me playing. All right, can you guys read that? All right. So this is the built-in Windows, the built-in Mac terminal. We're going to probably use the one in VS Code most of the time, but I just wanted to show you that it existed. If you can, there's a really great shortcut for finding, frankly, any program. If you hit Command Space, it'll pull up Spotlight Search. You can type in your program. So if you type in terminal, it'll autocomplete. You can just drop to your terminal. It also exists inside of applications and utilities. It's up to you. It's built in. You can use it. But I believe you learned CD yesterday, right? So change directory. So if I do change directory / it's going to take me back to, I'm now at the highest level. So I'm actually outside of my own user I'm above my own user profile right now, if that makes sense. So let's jump back here. Whoop. That can go away. There we go. Paths. So sorry, I got ahead of myself. We were going to start playing. But so paths. You have probably run into all kinds of paths in your life surfing the internet. You just didn't realize it. So if you ever see a website that's example.com/about, that's a path. So the /about is the path part. The rest of it's domain name, all that kind of stuff. I think Jeff talked to you guys about that a little bit. There's two different types of paths, at least in computer speak. There's a relative path and an absolute path. So you know how we just talked about how that slash is your home, like it's like the root directory, it's the highest one. If it starts in a slash like that, that means you're describing how to get from the root directory down to wherever you're ending up. So in this sense, it's saying logo.png. You can follow, it goes, okay, so logo.png is on the desktop, which is inside of Jane, which is a user, which is inside of users, which lives in the root directory. So you're like stepping up the file structure. A relative path is always going to say, here's how you find something from where I am right now. So this is saying, look for the desktop folder inside of whatever folder I'm in right now. So it's saying, and relative paths, like if the computer looks around and says, there's no desktop folder in here, I don't know what you're talking about, it's going to be like, no, this doesn't work. Error. Nope, not here. But like if it does find that, then it will go, it basically starts. So they're relative, it's relative to where you are currently. You guys will use relative versus absolute paths in locating files all the time in code. So just something to think about. Any questions?
The absolute always start with the root directory, always. Okay.
Yeah, especially in the context of websites. It always does.
Like no matter where I am, this is what.
Yep. Yeah, because it's a way of. So actually, I had an issue with this recently on my personal site that I had linked to my main CSS file, and I had adjusted something. I hadn't realized it had taken out the slash, and so all of a sudden it was looking for my main CSS file inside of my CSS folder based off of whatever subpage I was on. So like whatever other location I was on. So my CSS loaded perfectly on my home page, and then as soon as you went to like a subfolder or a subpage, it didn't work. I was like, what? What's going on here? And then I just, well, we're going to go over debugging next on Thursday, but I opened up Chrome DevTools and was like, oh, I'm getting this stupid error. Oh, because it's losing the slash. Okay. Yeah. Any other questions? I know I'm talking a lot, sorry. All right. Like I said, we just talked about CD. So CD is change directory. There's a couple of super useful shortcuts when it comes to change directory. There is, first of all, CD, it sounds weird, but a period actually indicates the current directory you're in. That sounds like, well, I'm here, why would I need that? Sometimes it's really useful for starting a relative path. So the parent directory, if you get really lost, if you like, I would encourage you guys, we're gonna go through a bunch of like navigation commands here in just a sec. Like, go home tonight and just like navigate around your computer. Just do it like on your command line, just for fun, because it's just a good way to get used to doing it. You're not gonna break anything. You're just traveling around, right? It's not like, not telling you to like delete a whole bunch of stuff. I'm just telling you to like navigate. And when you get lost and can't figure out where you are in your file structure and you're like, what did I just do? CD ... will take you up a level, which is often clarifying and helpful. So we talked about root directory. Home directory is different. So the tilde that we were talking about, home directories are actually specific to your user. So it's going to take you back to your home folder for your user. So like for your user profile, essentially. And then previous directory is just a dash, which is kind of handy. I believe Jeff had you guys do this the other day, but if it's a handy thing to remember, if you're like looking at a file in Finder and you're like, I need to go to this folder, it's got a really long, like I'm deep in the weeds in my structure here. It can take you a while to like have to type everything out. Just drag and drop it into your term. Like type in CD, hit space, drag and drop it. It'll just drop the whole path in there, and you can hit enter. Save yourself like 4 minutes of your life you'll never get back. So it's just helpful. Frankly, that's also helpful if you're like trying to figure out where a particular folder is. It's also kind of handy. All right, speaking of figuring out where you are, PWD, print working directory, will tell you where you are. It sounds dumb, but that's the thing about text-based interfaces, is it's really easy to lose track of where you are. At least I find it to be the case. So we'll go through one more of these. Yes, this is one of my other favorite ones. So LS stands for list. So if you do this, it's like showing you everything that's in the current directory you're in. You have options. These three options I have listed are probably like some of the more standard ones. LS has tons of options, just because it's similar to the sense that like you can decide how you want to view your files. In Finder, it's the same concept, right? Like you can get more or less information. You can see hidden files, which can be really handy for things like verifying that you installed Git correctly so that the .git folder actually showed up where you expected it to be. It's helpful. And finding out how big your files are, stuff like that. All right, we're gonna take a little trip around my computer here. All right, so we're in the root folder. So I'm gonna just print out what's in my root folder, which this is frankly pretty common. So applications you'll probably recognize, developer, users. So if we change directory into users, another really super handy thing, if you start typing, because you're like, I think that this thing exists in here, but I'm not really sure, and I know the first couple letters, if you start typing and hit tab, it'll give you the options of things that start with that, so that then you can actually finish it, right? And frankly, if you have long file names you have to deal with, just hit tab all the time, because it's nobody's got time for typing out all that stuff. So inside of users, this is where my user profile lives. So, and same is true on your computer. It's where your user profile lives, is inside of users. So if I do CD Christy, all right, see how it had said, hey, we're in /users, and we just switched over to a tilde? That's because the users/Christy folder is my home folder for my user, right? And the shortcut symbol for that is tilde. Some other fun stuff. If we do CD/. So what I'm doing here, instead of bothering to go, like, we can go up a level. I'm back in users. Now I'm back in my root folder, where I can change directory and say, hey, I want to go to bin. You can also I can get to /bin from anywhere by just doing /bin, right? Because it's in the root folder. Bin is mostly something I'm showing you because it's where lots of interesting things live. So, I was talking about bash. This is where the program for bash actually lives. Let's see, we're gonna hop back up to your user. So one of the funny things about the root folder is there's like 3 different, so you have user information, you have users, and then you have this USR thing, which is like the internal user. Mostly I want you guys to know where this is, because if you ever get like weird installer errors when you're trying to install stuff on your computer, like in my experience about half the time, the stuff that you're trying to find lives in this folder. So, side note. But you end up, I've spent a lot of time in the user local folder. It's where stuff like Homebrew, which you guys installed yesterday, lives. It's where a lot of things that are global, like that run globally on your machine, that are not specific to your user, end up getting installed on Mac. All right. Another fairly handy command, which we are going to go over in a little bit, is clear. All this does is actually just clear your screen. It doesn't delete anything, so if I want to scroll up, it's all still here. It just gives me space, so I don't have to stare at it. It can be handy. All right. Any other question? Pause. All right. Somebody laughed, so I know we're live.
Well, just when I did what you just did, I didn't get the same kind of directories.
Well, some of them are different because I have stuff installed on my machine.
Right. But like Homebrew didn't show up when I installed that yesterday.
Okay. So it depends on, it may depend on where you installed it.
Okay.
Like if it's possible that the default has changed. I've had Homebrew installed on my computer for a long time. So it's possible that either the default has changed or at some point I actually moved where Homebrew installed because I was having permission issues with it, which also happens sometimes. It's probably in there, but it may not be all the way as up high as. All right. Make directory. This one's kind of a fun one. These navigation things, they seem really boring. They're like my favorite thing to do on the command line because they're so much faster than being like, I want to make a new folder in this place and then I have to rename it. And it's like, it's way easier. So this is actually kind of cool. So you can basically the make dir path, like make dir direct, like command. Well, let's head over to my desktop so I don't start making folders in super deep places in my computer. Oh. Hey. Oh, I forgot a slash. That's what's going on. All right. Oh, by the way, I take a lot of screenshots. All right. My desktop always ends up being cluttered with screenshots. But all right, so we're going to make a new directory. And so you can, I'm going to make a new directory and just call it testing fun. If you've ever wondered why most computer programmers are known for naming their files and their folders with dashes or underscores or camel case or like anything that basically does not involve a space, the command line is actually why. Because if I want to make a directory and I want there to be a space in it, I have to type quotes and like it's just extra. Like it's just extra and it's not like it's that much easier to read. And then frankly, you should get used to not putting spaces in your directory names particularly, because it'll cause you all kinds of headaches when you're trying to put them on a web server. It's just get out of the habit. Instead of hitting space, just hit dash. or underscore. Trust me, make your life easier. All right.
See,
So.
I'm not getting that boot prompt either. See, I'm just getting.
Hold on, I'm attached to a quarter. Well, you are on your MacBook. Do a quick ls for me, or yeah. All right, so in addition to my massive number of screenshots, we also now have a folder called testing fun. If I want to go into that folder, you know, I can hop in there. I can locate myself, all those good things.
If you use the quotations, would you have to also use the quotations like whenever you reference that particular?
Yep. Yeah. So I don't know why I keep using that. So if let's just say I'm gonna let's make a new make a space folder. So two things, right? Like it's actually kind of hard for me to tell if this is one thing or two things just by looking at it. Because if I'll just make another folder in here. So now, I mean, they have a bigger space in between them, but it's just more confusing to look at. But also, if I want to cd, I'll just start, we'll say I want a cd space folder. I'm going to get wait, there's no such thing as space. Because when it's got a space in between it, it's assuming automatically that that's actually two arguments. So that's why you need the quotes around it to force your computer to recognize the whole thing as a single string. Yeah, so it becomes like, if it's something you're referencing a lot or something that you need to pull into a program, it gets really annoying. It seems like, oh, it's just a couple quotes, whatever. A couple quotes 100 times over becomes a lot of quotes. All right. So that you can make a whole directory. If you're I want to make not just a whole directory, I want to make a whole sub path of I know I need 3 folders in here. So I can actually make a directory. Actually, let me clear this so we can a little higher up here. All right. I can make a directory with /p option that'll say we'll go with testing inside layers. So now I have a new folder testing, but theoretically it should have also made inside and layers for me. Whoop. So let's see. We can cd testing /inside. We'll see if it exists. And it does. So, and it's got layers inside of it. So, whereas if I was doing that in Finder, even with a shortcut where I'm okay, new folder, name the folder, move inside that folder, name the folder. You can actually, if you want to put something in a really specific place and you know exactly what the path should be, you can just go forth and make it. Mm-hmm.
So you can make path, but can you make multiple folders inside? Say I just want to make 3 folders inside that main folder,
Mm-hmm.
but not stacked inside each other. Can you do that? Or you have to do each one separately?
You would probably have to do each one separately. This particular option is specifically for making it's just for making a path. You can. I've never actually tried to do a bunch of multiples like that. Well, actually, here, let's give it a try. All right. Test 1, test 2. there you go. I was wrong. So you can actually make them all at the same time. You don't need an option. You just
You do make directory, and then the name, and then make directory, and then the name in the same line. Right?
Yep. Well, you don't actually have to write make directory more than once.
Oh,
you just
don't?
nope.
You can just do multiple.
Yep. Yeah, it looks like it'll just make as many as you want. Any other questions? I know this is like breathlessly exciting.
Can you do the same thing, but like put it into context of like us starting from opening a folder, making the CSS folder, image folder. That way,
That's exactly what I'm thinking.
I think it would make more sense for me.
Sure. All right. Let's jump up here. I'm gonna go back to my desktop. So let's make we're gonna do we're gonna make a test project, and forgot my option here. We're gonna do test project with so we wanted /CSS, right? And we wanted test. So the one thing with this is because I'm at a higher level, I have to actually type out the full path each time. So CSS, JavaScript, and we'll do /images. So test project. So, yep, it's CSS, images, and JavaScript. So you can make them all in one command if you want. If you didn't feel like rewriting the same name of the overarching folder over and over again, you could make the initial folder, move into it, and then make your subfolders. And the cool thing about stuff like this, right? If you have like, you're following a specific structure, so you have all your subfolders, and you're like, hey, I really like making them this way, you could actually copy and paste this whole line someplace, and just keep it in a text file, copy, paste it, drop it in. I'm not gonna call it a script, but that's the concept, right? Like, you've just made it so that you don't actually have to like, you automated something. You don't have to keep redoing something over and over again. You just have to enter new names for like your overarching folder. It's a good question. I actually had not thought about doing it that way. Oh, sorry. Boop. I'm not quite sure why that keeps popping up.
I think that is easier for me to understand. It's easier to do. I see how it's easier to do what we just did like last week, just with one line.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm not used to math.
Gotcha.
So I can do that.
Yeah. Well, and frankly, Windows shells are actually similar enough. I'm not sure if the make dir command is like the make directory command is exactly the same, but the same concept exists on Windows too. We good? All right, so we just talked about making directories. If you just constantly run around making things, you will eventually need to remove things. Otherwise, you will end up cluttered. There's digital hoarding is still a thing. It's good to remove things every once in a while. So removing stuff basically just says, I want to remove this directory. So we're going to get rid of one of the directories that, let's go back to my desktop here. All right. Frankly, I probably should like remove all of these screenshots, but we'll deal with that later. So we're gonna go ahead and hop into testing fun here. And, you know, I don't really need that other folder anymore. So we just got rid of it, right? So it's just a type in, get rid of. It will probably, let's see, if I try to jump back up on here, if I try to remove directory, so the other folder, I never put anything in it, it was empty, it was just sitting there. If I try to remove test project, where we just put all those subfolders in there, I think this is gonna yell at me. Yep, so it's saying like, hey, you have stuff in here. This isn't what they call recursive in the sense of like, it just deletes the specific thing you're pointing it at, not everything. So if I want to remove like the whole test project folder, even with the stuff in it, I do rm-r, which that -r means I want it to be recursive. So I want it to grab all the stuff underneath it. This is one of those, like, watch yourself when you're doing this kind of thing, because if you accidentally added like a recursive flag onto it and you didn't actually want to delete everything underneath it, you may regret your life choices a little bit. It happens. Typing too fast is always a danger. But yeah, so now it let me delete the entire tree. And for the record, I put this whole PDF is on the Google Classroom, so you guys can go through and like play with these later and look at them. So we just did all the stuff with folders. You can do all the same types of things with files, but weirdly enough, they just have different commands attached to them. So touch is useful for creating a new file. So if you, for example, just set up all your project folders, and then you want to go through and create like an index.html inside your project folder, you would use touch to do it. So, so in the same sense that, so I have a new file .txt here. In the same sense that, like, when you're making a new file in a text editor, you generally have to tell it what type of file it is by actually adding the file extension. It's the same concept here. I don't think it'll actually error on you, but it'll just make like an unknown file type, which is not really helpful to anybody. Open, also useful. So open in this context, I'm talking about files. You can also open folders. So open is generally more specifically towards files, but you can like open, I believe it's open period will open everything. So let's, I'm gonna jump into testing fun here. I don't think, okay, there's stuff in here. We're gonna open period. Yep. So this actually just popped it up for me in Finder. You can actually specify, so open automatically opens things in their default program. So, you know, in the same sense that like if you double click on a file or a folder, it'll automatically open it. Open does exactly the same thing. If you want to specify, you can actually specify.
I was gonna say, it's like you want to open your index file.
Yep.
It's gonna open in the internet if you don't tell it to open it.
Yep. Yeah, so you can actually do that by naming the program, which there is an option for. We're going to jump. I'm going to show you guys another command, which I was going to talk about in a little bit, but we'll talk about it now for the fun of it. So every program has the option to say, oh, did I do that backwards? Yeah, I did. All right, so I just typed in man and then open. I was looking at this last night and I was like, man, this is kind of misogynist. It's actually short for manual. Has nothing to do with gender whatsoever. Sorry, my brain was in a goofy place when I was writing stuff yesterday. But basically there's a manual for all of these programs. So if you want to look at the manual, just type in man, which is short for manual, and the program name, and it will give you like all the flags. So you can scroll around in here. There's like so many different options that you will probably never remember all of them unless you use, like, you find ones that you like and use them on a regular basis. But the nice thing is you don't have to remember them because they're in your computer. You can just ask, right? So it's handy. Another super quick note, the number of times when I was first learning command line that I got, like, I opened something like this and I was like, I don't know how to get out of here. I'm officially stuck. And I just had to like close the terminal and like reopen it. That does technically work. It's kind of annoying because you lose where you were. I actually included a slide at the end of this presentation that has the like, oh shoot, I'm stuck. Here's all the different possible ways to like exit out of stuff, because they vary a little bit depending on where you are. I'm pretty sure this one is Q. So it's often some version of Q for quitting, X for closing stuff. Escape often also works. For some reason, Control-C is how you shut down a lot of stuff. That one I frankly don't know why that is. I just know that it works. So it's useful. I suppose it could be for close. Anyways. All right. Opening. This is CP for copying. Copying is one of those things that needs 2 arguments, because if you think about it, you're telling it what to copy and then you're telling it what to call the thing that you're copying it and where to put it. So you can, then this one also takes an R flag in the sense that you can actually copy like a whole folder if you wanted to. But in this particular instance, we're just saying, okay, this is the file I want to like copy, and here's the new one. So this is one of those ones that for some reason I have a lot of trouble remembering the actual command for it, which is ironic because it's my initials. But so let's see, we are in a place without any files. All right, so touch. I know, I'm like really original at naming stuff. So we have file.txt. So I want to copy file.txt to, let's see, I actually think I want to put it inside of the testing folder, and I'm going to say file2.txt. All right, so first sign of success, there is no file 2 in the folder that we are currently in. So let's see, and file 2 ended up inside of testing. It's just handy. It depends on what you're doing. This may be easier. Just, you know, actually just hitting Control-C and Control-V also might be easier depending on context. All right. Moving. So we just technically moved something by copying it. Speaking of digital hoarding, if you don't want to have things multiplying like bunny rabbits all over your computer, you need to be able to move stuff without also multiplying it. Moving does basically the same, like it's the same format as copying. It's just that use the mv command for move. Same thing, you can put a whole file path in your destination. Frankly, if you wanted to move something that you're not near, so like you wanted a full path for your origin and a full path for your destination, you could do that. You don't have to be in the same folder as something to move it. Or a lot of these things, actually. Remove, we just talked about. Same concept as remove directory except specifically for a file. Back to the whole recursive thing. You can remove a whole bunch of stuff at once if you want to. And the miscellaneous useful ones, which I think at this point I've probably shown you guys. So manual for just about anything. Don't forget that you can hit Q to exit. You can scroll up and down in manuals. You can also arrow key up and down in them.
Control F.
I don't think that works, sadly. I wish that it did. Clear, like I said, when things get really cluttered, it just gives you more space. Oh, yes. This is an important thing to note. I believe Jeff mentioned sudo yesterday when he was talking about Sass. So sudo is super, super helpful if you're having like weird permission issues where it's like your computer's not letting you install stuff that you need to install. However, when one takes all of the keys to the kingdom, you should be very careful about what you do with them, because sudo is like, uncareful use of sudo is the sort of thing that's like, oh look, my computer worked 2 seconds ago and now it doesn't. So be careful. Don't ever sudo anything on your computer that you don't understand, at least in a very general way, what it does. Or if you don't understand what it does, be sure that you are taking it from a very reputable source. Because, I'm not kidding, you can actually like totally destroy your computer. Because it's essentially, it's a super user, so it has all the permissions. You generally have to put in your like an admin password to use it. Yeah, and misspellings with sudo, like I think, for just as an example, a fun one, I think it was like last year sometime, AWS went down on like half the East Coast, which is Amazon Web Services, and like that like does not happen. Yeah, they ended up publishing it in the news. They found out later actually was some guy had like automated something with the use of sudo, and he had like hadn't noticed a typo. Needless to say, I'm gonna guess he probably doesn't work at Amazon anymore. But yeah, he basically like he took down like half of their cloud services because he didn't notice his typo. So if you ever sudo anything, and even if you know what sudo does, like always check for spelling errors and typos. And like this is just, I promise, this is best practice because it's just, it's, you know, when you're playing with fire, you should, you know, be careful. And yes, this is the many different ways to get out of being stuck in, like, you opened a file in your internal. So inside of Bash, there's actually a couple of different text editor options. You can actually do text editing direct, like you can open files and edit them directly in your terminal. I personally really don't like doing that, but there are people who like love it and think it's like the most efficient thing because you don't have to move and like all this stuff, and who are super just like super snappy at it. There's a guy actually, if you guys do go to OpenHack, or not OpenHack, Hack Upstate, he and his coworker have, I think, come to Hack Upstate last 2 or 3 years. They're both from Buffalo. He's one of those people that like, we were collaborating on something and I was just like sitting there just enjoying watching him use Nano, like which is Nano is one of the like internal text editors to Bash, that like, it was just beautiful. It was like so speedy and fluid, and I was like, I have not put the time and energy into figuring out how to do that. I'm really glad that you have, because it's like so efficient. But yeah, if it's something that you come across and figure out it'll be actually helpful for your day-to-day life because of the type of job you're doing, or like it just becomes useful, put the time and energy into learning it. If that doesn't happen, it's okay. Yeah. So this is like the tip of the iceberg about things you can do with command line. But I've also been talking for like a full hour. So there like are so many other commands you can do. If you're like, it feels like I should be able to do this in the command line, Google whatever you're trying to do, Mac command line, and probably you'll come up with the shortcut for it, like, or the command for it. So, like, feel free to play with stuff. Like I said, if you're not sudoing things or like blindly blanket deleting things, you're really not gonna like damage a whole bunch of stuff. So, yeah, terminal is one of those fun things to like just play with, and it kind of like, I don't know, at least it always makes me feel like a little bit like an old school computer nerd, because like I said, it feels kind of like it's out of the 90s, 90s, 80s, kind of 70s, in the days before, you know, we had nice looking screens. But it's also good for understanding how your computer actually works too. So, all right, I'm gonna let you guys get out of here, stop listening to me talk, breathe, walk around, rejoin the land of the living. Should we regroup at like 7:10? Cool. The inception screen. All right. But yeah, anyways, that's a total side note, but a big part of what makes an IDE an IDE is that it's not just a text editor, it also does, like, you have terminal options, you have file management, a lot of them actually have, I haven't dug into whether or not VS Code has a visual component to this or not, but a lot of them actually have visual Git tools involved with them as well. We're going to teach you guys how to do Git via the command line first, only because, well, it's a little harder, but it actually helps you understand it better. And then once, if you decide you want to switch over to using like a more visual tool because it's simpler, be my guest, whatever works. That being said, that was a random transition into how to find your terminal in VS Code. So terminal in VS Code, you can go view and then terminal, which will just toggle it on and off. Terminal, this terminal at the top gives you actually options for your terminal. So like you can split your terminal in half, like there's all kinds of stuff. For that, we're not worried about that at the moment. For the moment, you just want to be able to see it. So it's under view and then terminal. And if you guys want to use well, we'll get to that in a little bit. I was gonna say, you can open up the VS Code project you had for like your Best Buy homework and pop your terminal open there. That's totally great. If you want to open a new VS Code window, that's totally fine too. All right. Back to me talking too much. All right. This is another one of those, who has heard of Git? All right. Prior to seeing it on the screen at this exact moment, or I don't know if you guys had a chance to actually look at the like sort of prep resources I posted. I thought I had posted them like much earlier, and then I realized right before I went to bed that I hadn't posted them, so I was like, oh, oops, my bad, sorry. Have you ever heard of something called a version control system? A few heads nodding, mostly not. Okay, so Git is actually a form of a version control system. Git is actually so popular that people like to talk about Git like it's the only version control system that has ever existed. That is so not the case. However, most version control systems, similar to like different command shells, they do very similar things. Most importantly, they make it way easier to collaborate with people. Because I was talking about like working together is a really great way to learn, and it's also efficient for solving problems when you get stuck. The biggest problem that you'll run into though, so like, has anyone ever tried to like edit an Excel document that somebody else like has a local copy of, right? So like you have a copy of the Excel document, somebody else has a copy of the Excel document, right? This is a very like, I apologize, I work in an office, this is a very office example. And then you're like, wait, which one is the Excel document, right? Like, because we both made changes and we don't know if we made changes that fit together or they overlap each other. So the same exact thing happens when you have two people that are working on the same code files. Like, you could be working on, so say like, I've got a bug where it's like, okay, the header on my website's like not styled correctly. So somebody's like, okay, you need to go in and fix this. I'm like, okay, sure, I can do that. But at the same time, somebody else is like, shoot, the H1 on this page says exactly the wrong thing. Like, it's like the text is wrong. Like, why do we have this up here? So then like my coworker has to go fix the text in the H1, right? And I'm currently working on like styling it, right? So we're basically changing the same line of code, right? Like potentially, so like if I change the class or like whatever on the H1 and they're like changing the text, if we try to then both publish our changes at the same time, we run into like a conflict, right? We're gonna, whoever, it basically becomes like survival of the whoever got there last, because like if whoever first posts their changes immediately gets overwritten, right, by the person who posts them after. That's a super simple example. It happens all the time when you're doing, well, the phrase I've heard for this is when you're doing what's called Cowboy code practices, where basically you're not using version control. So version control can be a pain to set up. It's not bad when it's like just you. It can be a pain to set up with like 10 people, but it's so worth it. Like so worth it, because it's just, otherwise you basically accidentally step on each other's feet, right? And it's not a big deal if it's like, oh, I changed one style in like one class or whatever. Like if you've been working on this project for like 2 weeks and somebody comes in and overwrites your changes, you are not going to be happy. So it's important for collaboration, for keeping the peace between developers, and just making things simpler. The other super helpful thing is that it lets you track your changes, and be able to take risks with like trying things in your code without worrying about like never being able to get it back again. So if you've ever been working on a file and you're like, huh, this is like, okay, like things are good, like they work right now, but I'm kind of concerned this next thing I'm going to do is just going to like break everything. And you're like, well, maybe like, so if I don't have version control, maybe the way that I would solve that is I'd be like, okay, so I've got index.html. So let's make that index.html -v1. So it's like version 1. And then we can save index.html version 2. And I'll work in version 2, and that way I have a backup, right? Like, so if I totally screw stuff up, I can go back to version 1 and not have lost all of my work. I mean, that's great until you're 100 versions in and you're not really sure which version goes with what and what changes are like attached to them, and frankly, you just duplicated your file size on your computer by 100. So version control basically, instead of you having to duplicate your whole file over and over again, it's a thing that says, I'm going to watch this file and check that, like, I'm going to watch for the changes that you've made. I'm going to let you make those like anchor points that'd be the same as like saving a new version of your file. But I don't have to resave the file over and over and over again. It becomes a change log that lets you have those changes, and you can go back to them if you need to, but you don't have to have 100 versions of your file. Like I said, people love to talk about version control and Git like they're the same exact thing. They're not. Oops, sorry. I knew I would step on this at some point or another. Git is super helpful. I'm not knocking it. When I first learned about version control, I learned what's called Subversion, which is just an older form. Way less flexible, way slower, and frankly not as easy to use as Git. So Git is fantastic. I just want you to know that other ones exist, because you may end up in an internship or a job where they're like, hey, have you ever heard of list version control name here? And you're like, what's that? It's not Git. They do the same general thing. So if you understand how Git works and like understand the basic concepts, you're good learning whatever other type of version control system. All right. So Git has a couple of cool things about it. Like I said, it's fast. It's distributed. So that sounds weird, but like the way certain version control systems work would be like there's one master repository. It's like the source of truth is the like all the files come from here and they must all return here kind of a thing. And then every time you want to work on a file, you have to take your file out, like, basically to like check it out of that master place. It's like checking a book out of the library. Make your changes and then like check it back in. Which causes weird problems if two people want to check out the same file at the same time. And also means that you have to be connected via the internet or a network to that master repository. With Git, essentially everybody has a copy of the master repository. So like, it's like you have a copy of the library and I have a copy of the library, right? So like, if you need to check out a book from that library and I need to check out the same book, no problem, because my library is on my computer and your library is on your computer. It doesn't matter. I mean, once you try to merge them back together, that's a little more complicated, but we'll get to that. But the point is, you can work independently until you need to push things back together. Because everybody has the whole code base. It's not just like, you know, one person has all the stuff and then everybody else pulls out little pieces. The other thing that's handy, like I was saying, right, you think about, okay, we have version 1 and version 2. In Git, think about a commit as like, it's like saving that backup. And each commit has like a unique identifier with attached information. So that attached information includes when it was changed, like when it was made, who made it, and then you'll actually add what's called a commit message, which I'm hoping you will all become really awesome at writing commit messages and write really good ones that help other people and yourself understand what happened in those changes. Because I promise, like 3 weeks from now, you come back to what you did like this week or last week, and you'll be like, what was I doing again? Why did I do that? Think about like Git commit messages, sort of like your semi-public diary of what you're working on. And then, like I said, everybody has a local copy of the history. So I don't just have my changes when I'm working in Git, I have everyone's changes. So when we push everything back together, it then gets redistributed out, so everybody's got a whole copy. All right, like I said, Git as a changelog. It's watching your files. So when you initiate Git into a project, you tell it which files you want it to watch. So if something changes, it notices that something changes. And then when you're ready to make a commit of those changes, it's like a snapshot of like where those files are at that point in time. I know that this sounds totally crazy, but I promise, like, once you get used to working with like having Git as like a backup, working without it feels a little bit like walking on a tightrope without a safety net, like, because you're just like, it becomes normal to make commits, I promise. So then each commit is essentially like a little anchor point in history that you can go back to. You can look at your log, you can read it. It's like, you know, keeping a journal and then being able to walk back 6 months and like see where you were. All that kind of fun stuff. All right, so I was super excited when I found out that Jeff helped you guys install Homebrew yesterday, because installing Git with Homebrew is like the easiest way to install it, but I didn't want to have to go through like helping you install Homebrew, so he did that for me. All right, we're going to jump back to I'm going to jump back to our VS Code here. And you can actually run this from anywhere. It doesn't matter what folder you're in. I'm going to just jump out of this project folder. It doesn't matter. But you are going to run Well, you're going to run brew install git. Which I also, there's a text file in the like presentations and files folder for module 2. I added gitsetup.txt, so a lot of the commands that are on the presentation are in that file. If you like want to open it and copy and paste, it's totally fine. I just realized I hadn't told you it was there, so. All right. So if you brew, so it's brew, install, git. You guys seeing, I think this is going to tell me that I already have it installed, but maybe it'll just update it. Yep. Uh-oh. I just realized I haven't updated Homebrew in a while. This might be interesting. All right, well, my computer has decided to go back to the last 6 months of Homebrew. Did everybody run brew install git and had it actually complete? I'm actually probably going to kill this because I'm not kidding. I think I haven't installed Homebrew or I haven't updated Homebrew in about 6 months, so it has a lot of updating to do. All right, so if we're going to verify that it worked. So the command we're going to use is just git -- version. And you guys are probably going to have a more up-to-date version than I have because, like I said, I haven't updated this in a little bit. So I decided not to run through updating all the computer updates I haven't gotten around to in a while before class tonight because I figured it's always when you update things in a hurry that something breaks. So I decided I would rather have a computer to teach you guys with than not. But yeah, so everybody's getting a version of Git when they run that? Raise hands, ask a TA. So okay, so we're good? Okay, cool. Because unless you have Git installed, you can't use it. It's similar to Sass. It's not like you have to do this very often. Git doesn't change that much, which is part of why I haven't gotten around to updating it. But you do need to have it installed. Clear that out. All right. All right, so my next question. Did everyone actually get a chance to, does everyone have a GitHub account? GitHub accounts? If you do not have a GitHub account, can you raise your hand or let me know? I'm not going to be mad, we can't do stuff without it. So you don't actually have to have a GitHub account in order to use Git. GitHub is essentially a website that hosts all kinds of like remote GitHub like Git repositories. So it's GitHub in the sense of like it's a hub of Git repositories. If that makes sense. So if you guys can sign into your GitHub accounts, that would be super helpful. And then once you sign in, go on into your settings. So you're looking for github.com/settings/email. Except that I lost my Chrome. There we go. All right. So your GitHub dashboard looks something along these lines. I'm also going to make this less tiny. Approximately somewhere in there. Everybody's logged in. All right. So under your profile, up on the right-hand corner, there is a settings section. Please ignore the my public internet photo that I really need to update. All right, scroll down to, where did my, oh, sorry. It is, so on the left-hand side, you're going to go to emails. And then I want you all to verify that keep my email address private is checked, as well as block command line pushes that expose my email is also checked. This is a not required to use Git kind of a thing, but basically a couple of years ago, GitHub figured out we're about to set up your like username and email address associated with your Git account. Most of the time, especially when you're at work, that's just going to be your work email and your name. Like, who cares, whatever, right? But when you're pushing stuff to GitHub, like from your personal Git logs, every time you do a commit, it has your username, your Git username and your email attached to it. So if you use your personal email to like be your email address for your Git account, and then you're pushing stuff to GitHub publicly, you're basically publishing your email over and over again on the internet. So like basically somebody figured that out and was like, hey, I can scrape all these emails out of this, like hundreds of thousands of emails, right, out of this public, all these public repositories, which like, I mean, your email's not like your most private possession ever, but like, it's nice to not expose your personal information on the internet if you can avoid it. So next to keep your email address private.
Just a quick question. The username, should you have, like, I mean, what would you recommend? Because like,
I mean, I use my actual name as my username. I mean, for one thing, I have a website with my name as the domain, so it's like I'm on the internet at this point. It's more about like, I also don't really want to like have a bunch of spammy people contacting me. And so the nice thing is that like having GitHub basically provides like GitHub specific emails now for people. So that's what, I'm not sure if you guys can see this. I'm going to zoom in here for just a second. So my like GitHub email is this cpressler@users.noreply.github.com. So it's just an email address that they're automatically setting it up so that it'll, like if somebody emailed it, like I could set it up theoretically to forward to my actual email, but like mostly the email in my local Git profile is just useful for attaching to my public GitHub profile, if that makes sense. So it's not a, like, it's an identifier. It's not like I'm expecting people to contact me through this. Does that make sense? So you should, is everybody seeing an email address that is like from GitHub next to keep my email address private? It may or may not be the same format as this, because when I was looking into it, they changed the format recently, but so there may be some like extra numbers and letters involved. But basically mine looks this clean because I'm old. That's all it, it's yeah. But okay, so feel free, copy and paste that, or just copy it. You can paste it in like a text file, or if you pulled that like Git setup file, you can paste it in there if you want, or just remember it, and you're gonna need it in a sec, basically. All right. So this is also something that you're not gonna have to do. Like, I actually had to look up how to do this because I forgot, because I did it a really long time ago on my computer, and I was just like, wait, I know that there's a thing in here. You do this once globally and then you forget about it, unless you decide you need to change. You can change this on like a local repository if you really wanted to, for some reason. But like I said, this is just a configuration thing. So you're going to run git config -- global, user.name, and then where it says Mona Lisa in here, you put your name, or if you don't have to use your name, it's not required. So, you know, if you would like to be Daffy Duck or something, you can go for it. But I also don't want everyone to be Mona Lisa because that's just confusing. So, but.
And then same big timeline.
Yes. Yeah. So you're gonna be running that in your. If I do this correctly. Yep. So it should look like this. Because I already did this, so I'm gonna, maybe this is going to let me, there we go.
So will that change the name that's already displayed? At GitHub, will that change the name that's already being displayed?
Because I'm guessing you probably haven't, have you guys made, like, you probably haven't actually pushed anything to GitHub, right? You just have accounts.
Okay,
So
this is the name that's going to follow us when we push things out.
Yep.
Okay.
So this is actually, you're actually setting this all up on your local computer. It would not, like, if you were not pushing anything to GitHub, you could put all the personal information in here you wanted, because it would all be private on your computer. It's just because you're pushing it to GitHub that the whole privacy piece matters, because at that point you're pushing stuff out into a public forum. So, like, so if I was running this, this is what it would look like. All right. So everybody got their username set? Good? All right. So then the next piece of this, now we're going to set your email, which is that piece I was just talking about. So, oops. So this is, you're going to put, so it's git config -- global, just like you did before, because we're setting this all over your computer, and it's user.email, except in here, instead of ID plus username at users.noreply.github.com, you want to put that GitHub provided email I was talking about. So if I was doing that, it would, sorry. Would look like that. And like I said, if this git.setup.txt that I'm copying from is on the Google Classroom, if you guys don't want to have to type out.
Okay, I copied and pasted from the PowerPoint thinking it would let me go back and edit that ID plus username. So it's already there, so can I just, I'll type it in manually now and it'll override what I put in there? Okay.
Yeah. That is our next step. So if you've got everything set and you think it got configured correctly, what you're going to do is, so it's git config -- global and then user.name should return the name that you put in there. So if you're not seeing your name or you're seeing something else that you did not enter, then you'll need to reset it and you just rerun the command. It's saying command not found?
Yeah. I did a lot of things.
Alright. know why? Because you're missing Git in front of there. So it's Git. So it's Git config, and then space dash dash global. And then user.name. Now see if that'll. So let's see why. It's not telling you command not found, but it's also not printing out. Yes. Go ahead and show you a quick shortcut. You can actually up and down arrow into your history here. There's a way to check and see if there's a space being problem here. Let's check this and see direct. There we go. So what was going on is it's the space was causing the problem.
So if you need to modify it, like I put in the username twice.
Oh, like put it in you need to change it? You can actually just run that same command over and it will just overwrite it. Yeah. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah, that's an important thing to note. If you like realize you had a typo in your name or like in your email or something, you can rerun that git config global command for user.name or user.email with an argument. It'll just overwrite it. So get rid of this. That's driving me crazy. What? This whole like you missed that part? Yes. It does. I don't off the top of my head remember. There's a way to make it go away. It's like a bash setting, but it has to do with, it's the name of your computer, basically. I had TT instead of copy. So yeah, you can then run, if you want to check your email.
Also, this is actually a super handy shortcut I forgot to tell you guys with the command line. If you have like a really similar command you want to run, like again, very similar to what you just did, the up arrow actually gives you your history. So if you have to do the same thing over and over again, instead of having to retype it, you can actually just, you can up and down arrow through your history of stuff, which is just helpful.
The email account, were we supposed to use our own emails? Oh, okay.
So yeah, use the one that is that, like, it should match the, like, it's got the @users.noreply.github.com, but with your username on there. So
why does it give me an arrow? When I put in for the I did the same thing and then I had to redo it.
yeah.
That's how I.
The command line is like, that's the one reason it can be a little frustrating, is it's very like particular. But yeah, so if you do email, it should come up with your email.
That one should be okay. You have to control C to reset and then start. And then actually now what you can do is make it really efficient is press the up arrow.
Now I got it, yeah. I was
So
just
you're
trying to
using
change
so
my
go
name.
ahead and press the up arrow and so now instead of name, so delete name, put an email.
But I've got it.
Okay, so close accept what you actually need. So let's go back to your browser for your GitHub account.
User dot.
Yeah. You're gonna actually
But then you didn't.
so everything between that 4 and that 10.
Should stop all that.
Go ahead and copy
That's okay,
that and
space.
then paste.
Dash dash.
So
So now you're calling
up, grab your
global.
so hit and then hit space
Okay, then space.
and quote
User
open your
dot.
quotation marks there
Should give me.
and then paste it.
Yeah.
There you go.
There it
And
is.
then
Did did you do the email too?
Okay, so
Yeah, I
now
did that.
run, I just changed it, that one without the argument, so, yeah, there you go. Perfect. All right.
Like I said, not something you have to do every time you use Git. This is an initial setup thing that is generally set it and forget it, which is great. But it's good to not set it and forget it with personal information that you're then sending out on the internet. Sorry to be a privacy Scrooge, but you spend your life in a computer, it's worth it to pay attention to stuff like this. All right. So we are going to actually create local repositories now. What I'm actually going to have you guys do to start with for a local repository is the Syracuse.com code that you guys started yesterday, only because that's like in progress. We can make some simple changes to it without like, I don't want to break anybody's homework assignment basically. I will have you probably push that may be your homework actually for tonight, is to make a remote repository and push your Best Buy homework, because it's the same thing we're about to do. But so what you're going to do is hop back over to VS Code, and I want you to put in the path. So you're going to CD, and then you're going to put in the path to your project directory. So this is the one for your Syracuse.com. So I don't know exactly where Jeff had you guys save them, if he had them had you save them in a specific spot. This is one of those scenarios where it's actually kind of handy to just copy. So we can CD, and then I'm going to pull up a Finder window here, maybe. And
This is where we can just drop that file into.
yep. And so you actually are not aiming at a specific file, you're aiming at a folder. And sorry that this is like officially the tiniest my Finder ever shows up, which for some reason it's not wanting me to zoom in. Come on. There we go. That helped not at all. Sorry about that. Okay. Anyways, the point is you want your Syracuse.com, you want the whole folder, not just like a file. I apologize that you probably cannot see that at all in the back.
You want to be in that folder?
Yep, so you're going to CD to that folder,
Okay.
which...
So the path to your project directory, and then enter, then drag and drop.
So it's what you're going to do before you drag and drop, you're going to type in CD and then space. I forgot the space, which is why I just had to go back and add it. And then you can go to it in your Finder and just drag and drop it, and it'll drop into where your cursor is.
So if our main folder, because our main folder is careers and code, we should probably go back and put some hyphens or something, because right now my main folder has spaces in between the words careers and code. Okay. So anything.
You can just rename it, though.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's what you meant. You put it in.
No. When I drop it back to the CD inside the terminal.
You want us to get the Syracuse.com?
Yep. Yeah, so grab your Syracuse.com code. So you're going to CD, so you're in that folder. Yeah, developers are weird about all of their naming cases. They have all kinds of fun ones. Yep. Whatever is easiest for you to type, as long as it's not a space, you're good. Not quite yet. I'm just making sure everybody's in the right folder, and we're actually going to start, we're going to do what's called initiating a Git repository. So we installed Git on our computers, but it's just a program, like SAS, right? Like you have the program, but until you actually tell it to like be in that folder and to be watching, it's not going to do anything. It's just there.
You use the same watch command that we did for SAS?
No. It's like not, it's similar in concept, but so is everybody in their project directory? Okay, cool. So,
No, it's such a file directory, I just dragged it in.
so you just need to be in the folder. You don't actually need to be, like you don't.
I think I'm going to answer my own question because the inside the inside the folder.
You don't need the
is
bracket.
the
That's probably
Oh.
Gotcha. Yep. So if you're in your project folder and you run the ls command, you should be seeing CSS images and index.html.
Yes.
Good.
Wait, what now?
So if you're in your project folder and you run the ls command, you should be seeing CSS images and index.html, the stuff from your project. I'm gonna make this a touch bigger. Is that helpful if I make that a little bit bigger? All right. I think we don't really need this over there. Okay. There we go.
Can you edit in the terminal?
You can edit in the terminal. But it depends on what you're doing. It's generally, if you're doing a lot of text editing, especially at this point, I would suggest you actually just use the text editor. Like use the VS Code, the editor part of VS Code. All right. Everyone's in their project folder? Sorry, I don't want to like leave anybody behind too much. All right. The next thing we're going to do, so anytime that you need to start a Git project, you just created a project. Frankly, we were talking about this earlier, right? So like you make your project folder, you make your CSS, your JavaScript, your images folder, and your index.html. Probably the next thing you're going to want to do is run this command, git init. That tells Git to watch this folder, to watch all the files and stuff inside the folder. Yep. So init is short for initiate. So it basically says like, hey Git, out of all the folders on my computer, I want you to pay attention to this one. It's not actually gonna track your files yet. We're gonna go through that in a sec, but so you're gonna run git init, and you should get feedback that says something along the lines of initialized empty Git repository in path to your folder. You'll also notice something. So see how up here I just have syracuse.com, and then I have syracuse.com, and then all of a sudden it says, to the right of that, it says git : parentheses master. Is anybody seeing that?
Yeah. Well, no,
Not on. Okay, so okay, I'm wondering if this is a setting thing, or that's it. That's super interesting. All right, like I said, there's lots of ways to set up terminal stuff, and I've like tweaked things here and there. It's like a lot of layers of useful clutter that I haven't cleaned out of my bedroom in a long time. So what I'm going to actually have you guys do to make sure that it's set up correctly, so you're going to run an ls with a -a flag, which I don't know if you guys remember that the A option shows you hidden files. So anytime you have Git as a repository, like there's a Git repository set up in a folder, there's going to be an invisible folder there that says .git. So if you're weird like me and enjoy running your Finder with the show all of it, like all invisible files, it's just helpful. You can actually see them when you're like traveling around.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So is this how, is it Jesse, Mr. Massetti? Is this how he knew how much code we used on our own versus the code that he used when he sent us a certain file, because he sent us a solution file
Gotcha.
over the weekend, and one of his responses to me was that he noticed that I used more of his code than he wanted me to. And I'm like, well, I would have named it the same thing, so I just copied and pasted and then, you know, just added my own touches.
Gotcha.
So my question is, how did he know that?
Probably he just has enough experience at this point. He opened them next to each other and just looked at them.
Well, I did something and I noticed that he had a hidden JS file that didn't show up until I did something. I don't know if
It's possible he.
terminal or something, but there is a way to track it, like if you. So like it was a possibility that it was through.
It's possible he ran something. It probably wasn't Git specifically, but it was probably he could have run something that compared them.
Okay.
All right, but yeah, so you should be seeing. So if you run ls-a, you should have a dot .git in here. You also may see a .ds store. That's a default Mac thing. That's just hidden stuff, basically. Is everyone seeing .git?
Yes.
Woohoo! Success. Good?
No, it's a little splinter.
Oh no. All right, so all the things that we've done so far, except that was not what I meant to do. So Git init, like you do that once at the beginning of when you set up a repo. You do it every time you need to set up a repo, but you don't. Repo, by the way, being what most people, the word repository is really long and a mouthful. Most people call them repos. Yeah. So every time you need to set up a repo for a project, you'll run git init. Outside of that, you don't run git init because you already set up your project, you already initialized your project. The commands we're about to go over, you're going to use over and over again because they're sort of like the functional working stuff.
If you add a file to the folder, syracuse.com, will it pick that up automatically?
It will. So it will, except right now, we're going to actually see all of the files and stuff inside of our folder are going to actually show up as untracked. So what I want you guys to do is go ahead and, I'm going to clear this out so there's a little more space here. Go ahead and write and run git status. I'm going to talk you guys through what we're seeing here.
It says I haven't committed to anything.
Yep. Yep. So we have.
That's the safe thing, right?
Yep. So what we're seeing here. Hopefully, you guys are seeing something fairly similar. It says on branch master. You guys seeing that? One of the cool things about Git that we're not going to go into like super deeply today, but will show up actually in some of the like homework activity kind of stuff, and you guys will run into in the future, is Git has this really cool thing called branching, where you can actually, a branch is like you take all the files in your project and you create a second version of them, except there's no like, it's like a ghost version of them. So you're working on these files that are all the same files in your project, but you can actually switch, like if you switch from one branch to another, you can actually be in different versions of your files. It sounds super weird, but it's actually really helpful because if you've got two projects going on, like you're working on multiple projects, and that whole, we were talking about that issue of stepping on each other's toes, right? Like if I'm working on a project and my coworker's working on a project, it's actually easier sometimes for like me to make a branch for a project. I can make all my changes on my branch. I can push, and then when I'm ready to have all those changes affect the main master section, I can push those changes back in. It's just like, it's a little abstract and funny and has lots of tree metaphor involved, but it's very handy. It's actually part of why, like, I'll show you guys in a sec, but when the Git logo is that like line with the dots are the commits, and then you have the like other ones branching off. It's because Git's all about like you branch for separate things. All right, anyway, sorry. Branch side note over. In the short term, you can hang out on branch master. It's just you. Once you get a little bit of a better understanding of how branches work, it's worth playing with them for as you're working on stuff. Initial commit, because we don't actually have any commits. Normally you would see some kind of last couple of commits changelog here. And then it says untracked files, right? So we have CSS and index.html, which, if you guys remember, is basically what we had previously. So like that's like basically the contents of the folder. And then we have nothing to add to commit, but untracked files present. So basically it's saying, hey, you started this repository. You haven't actually told me to start watching anything yet. We're just like located Git here. Nothing's happened yet. So the next thing we're going to actually do is actually add stuff. Git add. You can do git add in a couple of ways. This particular one on the slide here is git add a specific file. So if for some reason you didn't want to add everything in your folder, your directory, you want to just add like a specific file to be tracked, you could just do git add that specific file, or git add a specific subfolder if you wanted to track the whole subfolder. We're going to do this the short way so that you guys don't have to type git add over. Although I guess, actually, we'll do it the long way just because there's two things in this folder. So go ahead and do git add index.html. So you shouldn't see anything after it does that, after it added, but what I want you to do is go ahead and run git status again. So now, anybody notice any changes? Mm-hmm. And is VS Code color coding for you guys like it is for me? Mm-hmm. Good. So generally speaking, Git on the command line color code stuff. So if something's brand new, it's green. If something is changed or not added, it's red, generally speaking. You can actually change those colors if you decided you wanted them to be like SU colors, you totally could. Not sure it's worth the effort for me personally, but you know, to each their own is totally fine. All right, so we just did that with a file name. Do we want to do it with CSS, like the CSS folder? So we can do it with the CSS folder too. It's not just files. So you're going to run git add again. And this time we're just going to run it on CSS. And then to see our progress, we're going to go ahead and run git status again. So as you notice, we just added CSS, right, like the folder, but this is actually showing up as like, we got all these new files in here because Git still tracks at a file-based level, but you can add a whole folder of files at the same time. And the other thing, the way that I was going to have you guys do this as like the quick version, if I wanted to add the entire contents of a folder, you can actually run git add and dot, and that will just add everything inside the folder at the same time. We just added everything. Yep, git add space dot. I mean, we just added everything inside the folder because it didn't have a ton in it, but like, if you've got a lot of stuff in your folder, generally speaking, your pattern is going to be make your initial project folder, set up your files, git init, git add dot. Just adds everything, unless for some reason you wanted to specifically ignore stuff. Know that there's a thing called a Git Ignore File that you can actually, is like a configuration thing inside of Git that you can say, hey, I don't want you to track like a specific file name, or I don't want you to track anything ending in .xml, or you can pick basically. Know that it exists so that if you ever need to use it, you can Google it. We're not getting into it today.
So pretty much everything that's still listed in red when we type in git add dot will be added to the green place.
Yep. Yeah. So like I don't have anything still in red, so running git add dot wouldn't do anything. But if you guys still have stuff in red,
Do you have a store file?
it's so .ds store is actually those exist in just about every file at every level in Mac. It's a Mac OS thing, so you don't need to track it. It's I mean, if you end up tracking it, it's not like a big deal. That's an example actually of something that you could say like, hey, ignore the .ds store file. We don't need it.
I was gonna ask how to push, to remove something from the branch.
Oh, to like, so if you have something listed in a new file and you don't want it to be, it's a good question. All right, let's see. We're doing in commits. Yeah, there's, well, yeah, so git ignore is actually a file specifically. Why am I blanking on how to remove?
It's just a DS store, I'm just trying it.
Oh, gotcha. We're gonna do a quick. Sorry, I actually don't remember the command for just removing a specific file off the top of my head.
It says git rm -r.
There you go. I would guess the -r would make it recursive. So if you have a specific file you want to remove, try git rm and then the file name and see if that'll do it. Thank you. But yeah, like I said, you can always pull stuff in, or Google, which also is generally faster. We'll hop out of there. All right, everybody's, the stuff you're seeing in green is.
No, I only asked it to remove index.h.
So you did git rm index.html?
No, I'm sorry.
I just did git rm.ds_store.
So I still have.
And it says fatal.
It didn't move for me.
That seems hard. But
So I typed,
Yeah.
Forced renewal.
Yeah, so this is saying, hey, there's changes. Are you sure you want to do this? And so if I actually definitely do want to do it, I would have to add a force flag on there. I, however, don't actually want to do that because I want to be tracking my index.html file, so we're going to just leave it for now.
see, that's index 2. I'm trying to
Generally speaking, you're better off tracking more than less. You can always,
I'm trying to remove index.
I mean, like I said, I was just playing.
yeah, no, for sure. So the next thing, so we still actually haven't committed anything yet. This is just saying, hey, like, hey, Git, we want you to track these particular files. So then the last part of this I was talking about, you create a commit and you write commit messages. So I'm going to show you guys, there's 2 ways to actually do a commit message. I'm going to run you through both. This version I have in the slides is the like 1-line way. That works. There's nothing wrong with it. So you do git commit, and then -m. So -m is the option that says, hey, this is my message. And so then anything that follows in quotes is going to be your Git message. So generally speaking, for your initial commit, it's your commit message basically is just like, you know, initializing or like setting up repository, or like first commit to set up repository or whatever. Most of the time you haven't really changed much. So there's the way to do it, like, so this is my initial commit, just setting up. So you can do it that way. And then if you hit enter, it'll go ahead and make your commit. The other thing you can do is you can actually run git commit without the m, so without the -m. If I hit enter here, what's going to happen is it's like, hey, you didn't write a commit message. Commit messages are required. And it's going to pop open. Remember I was talking about the built-in text editor inside your terminal? This is the built-in text editor inside your terminal. So in here, the nice thing about this is I can say like initial commit, oops. So the nice thing about like writing it inside of like Nano or Vim is that it lets you do a little bit of formatting if you want to. You don't have to. This is overkill for your first commit. But if you have like, hey, like fixed a bunch of typographic bugs, or fixed like, you know, a bunch of file errors, and then you want to like elaborate which files you like fixed, or like what the like problem was. So if you want a title and then like to have a couple of sentences, this is easier. Like I said, total overkill for your first commit, because you don't. The way to get out of this is you hit Control X, and then it'll be like, hey, do you want to save this? And you just say yes. You say Y or no to yes. I'm actually going to destroy this because this is total overkill for this to be the first thing. So,
but we can hit Y bars, right? It's okay.
Yeah. So I'm going to do git commit -m, and I'm just going to do initial commit. Oops. That was a... Speaking of, what did I just do? Except apparently freeze my computer.
So when you hit the command X to get out of it, it just goes back to your command line?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I think you forgot that.
I didn't think I did it right.
Yeah, I did.
Exactly what happened.
I actually just hit... there we go. Well, that's going to be the weirdest commit message I ever wrote. Right. Yeah, anyways, careful typing, helpful. I just accidentally hit Shift and the quote key and enter at the same stroke, and apparently that was a new shortcut I did not know existed. It happens. I actually had a coworker one time who like patently refused to use shortcuts for that exact reason, because he was like, I just get myself into trouble, and I was like, and you do everything 4 times as slowly as you need to. But you know, they're not without danger. All right, so we'll go ahead and run git status again. All right, so now you shouldn't be seeing any files, right? Because we just added everything. We just added everything, and we haven't made any changes at all. So it's saying, hey, nothing to commit. Working directory is clean because there's no changes to be made. It's a fun place to be in. This is something that you really end up getting a feeling for, but essentially, as you work you'll hit a point like where you should stop, commit your changes, and then keep working. Like I said, my rule of thumb is sort of like, hey, can I describe what I have done in the last little, like, have I accomplished a small pebble of something, and can I describe it in a couple sentences? If you're not sure if you should go ahead and commit, just do it. It's worth it. All right, let's do something a little more fun here. Actually, all right, so it's like 8:25. I don't want to keep you guys like too super late. So I'm going to give you a choice here. We can move on directly to pushing our initial commits up to GitHub, or we can make a change, make another commit, and then push both of those.
Push to GitHub.
Okay.
Because if you do that, then we can see what happens on the website, right? Right.
Okay.
To see if everybody else agrees. Okay.
Is everybody else okay with that?
I need to see something before I leave, so
Gotcha.
to the webpage so we can
Got it. All right. All right. We already pretty much talked about this stuff. All right. Before we push stuff, I'm just going to really quickly show you guys how to pull your Git log. They're very short because we just made one commit, but you just run git and log. And this is my beautiful initial commit here with the word clear in it, which, you know, because I was trying to get out of the spot that I was in. But this is what I was talking about. So here's your hash key, right? This is attached to every commit, like, whoop. Every commit has a hash attached to it. And then this is what I was talking about with your author as your username and then your email address. So that's why when you push stuff, it'll show up. And then we have our date. All right. Like I said, there's all kinds of stuff about undoing changes, branching, merging. We're not actually going to get into all of it. This learninggitbranching.js.org, I don't know if any of you guys had a chance to like play with it a little bit today. I'm going to probably just say, like, hey, explore this as much as you want to for homework. There's some like pretty advanced stuff in there. If you start getting like feeling like this is going way, way over my head, you're allowed to stop. You're not like required to do the whole thing. It's just handy. All right. So we're going to head back to our GitHub accounts in our browsers. Except not that one. Also going to zoom myself back out here. All right. So go back to your dashboard here, which you can just hit the, by the way, this thing, little guy, their logo is called an OctoKitty. Random side note. You will now understand the merger between an octopus and a cat that you see all over the internet. You'll start seeing them everywhere, trust me. So you're going to just click the new button over here, making a new repository. So,
Where do you go?
so on your,
button, it just is like a text. So it's create.
that works too.
Wait, where?
So
Green button.
there's no green button.
Click on the cat.
So yeah, so go ahead and click on the cat in the upper left-hand corner to take yourself back to your,
Right underneath the cat. Nope. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so create new. There's no green button there.
oh, it might just be because you guys you don't have a,
There's nothing there yet.
yeah, there's no repository there yet. So, yeah, so click on create new repository, whatever it happens to look like. Everybody there? You guys can name your repository whatever you want. I'm probably going to call this so careers and code, syracuse.com. That's just what I'm calling it. You can call it whatever you would like to call it. It's fine. You can have a description if you would like to. Well, we'll leave that. If it's public, you should be good. So you can have the option of creating a private repository on Git if you want to. At this stage in the game, I'd say just you don't have anything to lose for having your work public. If there's, the only reason you would do something like this would be related to like if you're working on a private project for somebody and you wanted to track, like you wanted to track code for a private project, like for a client or something, and they didn't want all their stuff public, which is totally fair. But it's a good thing to put your stuff out on, like your work out on the internet. Generally speaking, I would also say initialize a README. For the moment, we're going to skip it. You can always go back and add this later. README files show up as like an explanation of what the repository is, which is just handy. But for the moment, you can go ahead and click Create Repository. Create Repository. So everybody's seeing a page semi-similar to this? Is that a no? Mm-hmm. Yes.
So is Git like Visual Studio where you can go in and edit code? Or do you have to do that in Visual Studio and push it to GitHub?
Yeah, so you want to edit it in Visual Studio and then push it to GitHub. You can actually technically edit files on GitHub itself, but it's way more efficient to do it in Visual Studio Code. We are going to need this URL here, the one that says GitHub / your username and then whatever you named your repository. The fun little thing, that clipboard looking thing on the right hand side, is actually, we'll copy it for you.
We're still trying to figure out what I'm supposed to be.
I think she must have clicked out of this page. Had to go back.
And then this right here, right? No, that's not the same page.
There isn't any code in here, so like in the repository itself, so if you actually click on the code tab for the repository, this should be what you see. Oh, gotcha.
Oh, you know what I think threw me off, that the section that says quick setup, it doesn't.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, basically what you need is, and if you can't find it, like, it's always going to be the same format. So it's https://github.com/ your username / whatever you name the repo.git.
Okay,
Okay. Oop. I'm doing all kinds of interesting things today.
if I was on the tabs up here would show. Let's see what this looks like. I guess we have some really light.
All right, so the next thing we need to do, we have our local repository. We just created one that's not attached. We need to attach them to each other. So what we're going to do is you're going to say git remote add origin, and then you're going to put that repository URL in there. So VS Code. So head back to VS Code in your terminal. Oh, and I'm going to put that in clear. So this is actually, I believe, yep. I actually put it in the git setup.txt in there as well. So it's git remote add origin, and then you need your GitHub repository URL. You can go ahead and hit enter on that. It won't look like it did anything. I think if we do, nope, it's not going to tell me. It's only going to tell me my local. So what we just did is git remote. So I said, hey, there's a remote branch out there that I want to connect my repository to. I want to add. And then what I did is actually I just called it origin. So so it's essentially, there's now that branch that exists out there, it's saying, hey, this is actually, like, it's called origin, and it exists at the URL that we have here, is that Git repository. So we have code, we currently have code on our local machines, but we want them on GitHub. So what you're going to do is you're going to run git and then push _ -u origin and master. Yeah, sorry, I said I apologize. I said underscore. So git push is the way that you push your code from one place to another. So right, we have code that sits on our local machine, but we want it to go up to GitHub. What we're saying is I want to push to origin, which is that external URL we just created, and I want to push my master branch to there. So it'll actually take it a second to do this normally. Is it asking you for a password? Yep. So yeah, I have mine stored in my computer. So it'll ask you for your GitHub username and password. You can actually store them inside of your bash profile, which is a lesson for another day. Well, your username is the same as your GitHub username, so you can actually go look at your profile for that. As someone that is really bad at remembering passwords, password managers are like the best things on the planet. If you want suggestions, let me know.
Is there a way to, now can I check it on the
Yep.
GitHub?
So if you entered your username and password and you got the same kind of like message where it said it pushed stuff, you can actually go back to the repository where we just were, where it had that URL. If you refresh the page, you should actually see stuff.
Gotcha. There we go.
So you should be seeing files.
My commit message is here for the world to see.
I use LastPass, which is already
Do I have to type it?
LastPass is solid. There's a bunch of password launch. I like LastPass because it has a Chrome extension too. So like, remember passwords that you use all the time, so you don't have to like log in stuff over and over again. You just click on it and it automatically password for you.
Is that from what Google also uses?
Google versus LastPass. The nice thing about LastPass is they also monitor like kind of runs stuff. So if something things like that.
I've also been.
I'm actually not sure that's entirely. There's one more thing I want to show you guys after code. So part of like the same thing. Or it's like, oh, I can't remember.
But now I'm trying to put my username and password. It's available. Remote origin already exists. So I created the origin, but now I'm trying to get back to the point where it prompts me for the username
So go ahead and do git push. So you're going to do git push, so it's actually git push dash u origin master. There you go. Yeah, if you guys had to reset your password or whatever, you just need to run the same
Command again, which is the one that's actually hanging out up here. That one.
I don't want to start it.
So you're probably gonna tell us this next, but you're gonna tell us how to, so when we are working like tomorrow and we wanna push something back to GitHub, we just go through the same process?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't think need the -u flag, but you can just do git push origin master.
Okay.
But you also, when you make commits, you don't have to push them to GitHub right away.
Okay.
You can keep stuff locally, and it'll just show up, like, in your Git log, it'll be there. And then, yeah, when you're ready to see stuff on GitHub, you can do that.
Okay.
Okay, I don't know what's happening on mine. So I tried logging in and it said my password wasn't valid. So I tried it again, tried the push, right here, origin.
Okay. So
It's already exists.
okay. So what you're gonna do is do that git push.
Oh.
Here, it shouldn't, I think, not uppercase. And then dash u. And then origin. And master. Just space master. And now it wants your username and password again.
Okay, this.
Well, it actually might have, try hitting enter, it may have actually worked. Sometimes.
Invalid username and password.
Okay. Okay, so it didn't, so just go ahead and try it again.
It's not showing if I typed it in or not.
Oh, yeah, it's, so that's pretty typical. You guys probably noticed when you're typing your password in on terminal, the cursor doesn't actually move.
That's so annoying.
It's super annoying, but it's also one of those, like, it's like a security thing. It's the same as like blocking out the text, basically. I will probably tomorrow Google pull up the, like, how to save your, how to store your GitHub username and password into your terminal phone file so that you guys don't have to re-enter every time you push stuff. Because that's why I just went when I did that, because I have it stored in my terminal. It's just handy not to have to, like, keep re-entering every second.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
I guess. I had to type it all in.
Okay, cool. All right, so if you guys are seeing,
That it pushed stuff. Oh, wait. I'm looking for Chrome. So you should be seeing stuff. So you, excuse me, you should now be seeing files on your actual repository. And then the other thing you can do here, you can actually open up your settings and scroll down to where it says GitHub Pages, where it says none. If you go ahead and say, yeah, you know, we want master branch. Yep. So, so when you click master branch, what it's going to do is it's going to save and refresh the page like it just did for me, and then it'll give you the URL that you can actually go see the code that you just pushed. Just copy period. Beautiful project that it is at the moment. It won't be the same URLs, but I have because I actually, my website is a GitHub Pages account, so, or project, so that's why it has like a clean URL. But you can set up a GitHub Pages for any repo you set up on GitHub, and it'll automatically pull your index.
Where is GitHub data? Where is
So, go to the repository. So it's not in your, yeah, so go.
do you stable?
And then it's actually in the settings specifically. Because GitHub Pages is actually, it's like per repository. So you want to grab this branch, and then it should save it, and when you scroll down, it should tell you the page.
Click on
Yeah,
this.
so if you click on that, you should actually see it.
Then I have settings.
It's just the master branch option.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Now, what is it right now?
I might give it a little bit, it might,
So when you push it, that was supposed to be your now.
but if you get that URL, you should be able to access it. Actually, if you don't look at it.
so then you go back to your project.
Now,
You can, like,
And then you have environment.
here we go.
And you can go here.
Genius.
So, I'm not.
Yes, sure.
Alright, so I know we kinda went over a little bit,
Right, and then
but,
scroll
that's
down.
actually all we have for tonight, so
And then,
if you guys are done and wanna go home,
master.
sleep or study or whatever, if you have questions,
There's pages.
Is it pages? Yeah, here, master. No, I'll drop down. Master branch. Good.
Okay,
And
go back, nope. Go back to your projects.
okay, so,
where?
Up.
can you hop back to the
Yeah.
Sorry,
Just
I'm
click
on.
on the project. Yep, there you go. No, you're fine.
You pulled
Then
in,
go, see where it says environment? There's like a little rocket ship there.
but
Up.
it means that there's a file.
Okay, then where it says,
Overwrite the file that you already.
yep, view.
So you're totally good.
There you go.
We actually just.
That works.
So much stuff to Google.
So,
Yeah. I feel like after my sleep, I was just going over That was fun. That was a lot of knowledge.
yeah, it doesn't like that, like.
So that's, I think, I don't know, like, sometimes brain things like this one, it's like,
Yeah, it's like all floating around.
like, it's there, you just,
It's looking for something to latch on to. That's how my mind works. It's like floating. It's like, oh yeah, I remember that.
Oh, she's still recording. I'm just saying, so what we all need to do is, one night after class.
She's still streaming. I don't know what to stop it.
Yeah, you can stop it by
VIP
going.
membership passes.
Yeah, you can.
And everybody stop by the store first and get their poison, whether that be chocolate, beer, or whatever. And we